Attention, brave souls. What you're about to witness might make your heart race. Before the suspense takes over your screen, click subscribe now and hit the like button. Get ready for a spine-chilling experience. But be warned, only the boldest will survive until the end.
My name is Marcus Grayson Kane, and I'm 37 years old. Most people don't know who I am, and that's how it's supposed to be. I'm a captain in an unacknowledged branch of the U.S. military, a unit designed to handle what you might call non-earthly threats. We operate in the shadows, fighting things that governments swear don't exist, things they're too scared to admit are out there. I've been in this game for years, and I've seen things that make nightmares look like bedtime stories. What I'm about to share with you, I need you to understand something first. This isn't a story for entertainment. This is real. Every scream, every shadow, every heartbeat, I lived it. So, if you decide to keep listening, just remember, there's no turning back. Once you hear this, you'll see the world differently, and you might not like what you find. It started with a call to the Black Hills of South Dakota, late spring 2021. I remember the email came through with a subject line that only read, Red Zone, Tier 4 displacement. That's military speak for civilians gone missing, possible cryptid activity. 10 people had vanished over the last 6 weeks, all centered around an abandoned mining town called Havens Hollow. The moment we arrived, I knew something wasn't right. The air was heavy, thick with the kind of silence that feels alive. My team, 8 of the best operatives I'd ever worked with, moved through the old mining roads with precision, but even they seemed rattled. This place wasn't just abandoned, it was wrong. The first thing we noticed was the smell. It wasn't death. It was older, muskier, like wet earth and rusted metal. Havens Hollow was a ghost town, the kind where the wind seemed afraid to blow. The buildings were skeletal remains of a once bustling mining settlement, their windows hollow eyes staring into the forest beyond. Grayson, we've got movement. That was Alvarez, my second in command, whispering into his comm. She was staring into the tree line to the north, her rifle at the ready. We all turned, and that's when I first felt it. The watching. I can't explain it better than that. It's not like you see something, it's like something sees you. We pushed deeper into the town, setting up a temporary base in what used to be a general store. Inside, the walls were lined with old shelves, dusty but intact, like the people who'd lived here had simply vanished mid-step. We found shoes, bags, and even plates of food that had turned to moldy sludge. It was as the place had been frozen in time, waiting for someone, or something to return. That night, the screaming began. It was Alvarez again. She was on first watch when we heard it. A long, bone-chilling wail cutting through the silence. It wasn't human. I want to make that clear. Whatever made that sound wasn't human. It rose and fell, almost melodic, but warped, like a lullaby played backward. The noise came from the woods, and Alvarez, against every protocol, we drilled into her, broke rank, and started moving toward it. Alvarez, stand down. I barked into the comm, but there was no response, just static. The rest of the team scrambled, fanning out to cover the perimeter as I sprinted after her. The sound was louder now, closer, and it seemed to echo from every direction. When I finally found her, she was standing in a clearing, staring into the trees. Her rifle dangled at her side, forgotten. Alvarez, I hissed, grabbing her shoulder. She turned to me, and I'll never forget the look on her face. Her eyes were wide, her pupils blown out like she'd seen something her brain couldn't process. They're calling me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Septon, it's my sister. She's out there. She needs me. Her sister had been dead for 3 years. Before I could respond, she bolted into the woods. I chased after her, shouting for her to stop, but the trees seemed to close in around us, the branches twisting like grasping hands. The wailing grew louder, overlapping, as if there were more than one voice now. And then it stopped. When I reached the spot where she should have been, there was nothing. No Alvarez, no footprints, no sign she'd ever been there. Just the still, suffocating quiet of the forest. We searched for hours that night, calling her name, combing every inch of the area. But deep down, we all knew it was pointless. Whatever had taken her didn't leave traces. Back at the base, the tension was palpable. My team, battle-hardened, unshakable professionals, looked terrified. Nobody said it out loud, but we all thought we weren't alone. And then I found the symbol, etched into the wall of the old general store. Almost invisible under layers of dust was a crude carving, a circle with jagged lines spiraling inward. It wasn't in any of our databases, but I recognized it. Years ago, during a classified mission in Alaska, we'd encountered similar markings at a crash site where a team of researchers had vanished. I ran my fingers over the carving, feeling its rough edges. That's when I heard it, the faintest whisper, so soft it could have been my imagination. But it wasn't. Captain came. It said my name. The forest swallowed us whole, its thick, gnarled branches clawing at the night sky like skeletal fingers. I felt the weight of it, the oppressive silence that had crept in after our first loss. One moment, we were a team, cohesive, invincible, and then we weren't. Those cries, so human, had lured Jenkins into the shadows, and now he was gone. No body, no blood, just his rifle lying in the underbrush, bent as if by some impossible force. I couldn't shake the sound of his scream. It wasn't terror. It was worse. It was resignation. We pushed forward, though every instinct screamed at me to turn back. It wasn't long before we found it. The entrance to the facility buried deep beneath the earth. A rusted steel door, half concealed by the creeping vines and thick moss, loomed before us. It felt wrong, out of place, like a relic of something that should have stayed forgotten. The air inside was colder than it had any right to be. Our boots echoed against the concrete as we descended, the sound too loud in the suffocating quiet. The place stank of mildew and something metallic, like old blood. My flashlight swept across the walls, revealing peeling paint, faded warning signs, and claw marks. Deep ones. Captain, you seeing this? Carter's voice cracked as he gestured to the gouges. They weren't random. They followed a pattern, like someone, or something, had been trying to communicate. We ventured deeper, my team's chatter fading as unease set in. It wasn't until we reached the central chamber that we understood what we were dealing with. A massive observation room, its walls lined with shattered glass and rusting equipment, stretched before us. At its center stood a containment pod, its reinforced steel walls twisted outward as though something had ripped its way free. That's when I saw it, the files. A stack of manila folders, their edges curled with age, sitting on a table near the far wall. The label on the top folder stopped me cold. POJCT WIR Subject Tatty 3. I hesitated before opening it. My hands felt heavy, like the weight of the truth was physically trying to stop me. But I had to know. The pages detailed experiments that read like something out of a nightmare. DNA splicing, neural manipulation, forced mutations. They tried to create something controllable. A weapon. Subject Daddy 3 had been human once, but the tests had stripped that away, leaving something feral. Something that hated. They made it. I murmured, my voice hollow. They built the damn thing. The room chilled as I spoke. It wasn't just the cold, it was the sudden realization that we weren't alone. A sound broke the silence, a low, guttural moan that rose into a piercing wail. It reverberated through the metal walls, shaking loose decades-old dust and sending shivers down my spine. My team froze, their eyes wide and searching. Then, we heard it again, the voice of Jenkins. "Help me," it called, weak and desperate. It came from the hallway behind us, the same one we'd just cleared. "Septon," Carter whispered, his rifle trembling in his grip. "It's not him," I said firmly, though my voice wavered. I wanted to believe it, to convince myself it was true, but doubt crept in like a poison. The cries grew louder, closer, and then changed. They weren't Jenkins's voice anymore. They were mine. "Turn around, Marcus," it said, smooth and mocking. "Face me." I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. This thing wasn't just a predator, it was intelligent, it was playing with us. "Stay together," I ordered, though the words felt meaningless. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw it, a silhouette at the edge of the beam. Too tall, too thin, and those eyes, glowing faintly, reflecting the light like an animal's but filled with something far worse. The team started to splinter. Fear had a way of breaking people, turning trained soldiers into frightened prey. It was feeding off that, dragging us into its game. I kept my focus, my mind racing as I tried to remember the schematics I'd seen in the files. There had to be something in this facility that could help us, something they'd used to control it. I found it in one of the side rooms, an old sound wave generator, its controls covered in dust and grime but still functional. According to the notes, it emitted frequencies designed to disorient subject TADI-3. "Get this thing powered up," I barked, shoving the device into Carter's hands. "We're not dying in here." The cries intensified, echoing all around us now. It was inside the walls, inside our heads. For a moment, I thought I felt breath on the back of my neck, and when I turned, the corridor was empty. But I knew it was there, waiting for us to fall apart. As Carter worked on the device, the lights flickered again. This time, they stayed off, and in the darkness it came. All I could hear was the sound of its claws scraping against the floor, and the low, guttural laugh that sent ice through my veins. The air felt colder down here, as if the earth itself exhaled frost through these long, forgotten tunnels. My breath echoed against the damp, crumbling walls, mingling with the sound of my boots scraping over loose gravel. The rest of the team was gone, either scattered or worse, and now it was just me and the thing that shouldn't exist. The whaler. I gripped my rifle tighter, its weight somehow more reassuring than the advanced tech strapped to my back. The sound wave device, my one card to play, hummed faintly, a comforting reminder that I wasn't entirely out of options. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a weapon, it was an apology for everything we'd done. The tunnel stretched ahead, narrowing into a gaping black maw. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to turn back, but I couldn't. Not when that thing was out there, feeding off fear, off mistakes. The sound came first, a faint whimper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. It sounded human, a woman pleading. "Help me, please," did. My gut twisted, and I had to fight the instinct to call out. I knew better now. I'd seen what it did, how it lured its prey with perfect mimicry. But even knowing that, the sound tugged at something primal. I pressed forward, the flashlight on rifle sweeping the tunnel ahead, the beam slicing through the darkness like a fragile thread. Then I heard it again, louder this time. "Marcus." My blood turned to ice. It was my voice. It called my name in a perfect replica of my tone, my cadence. "Marcus, why did you leave them?" The words echoed off the walls, bouncing back at me from every direction. I stopped walking, forcing myself to breathe, to focus. "You don't scare me," I muttered, though my trembling hands betrayed me. The sound of my voice only made it worse. It laughed. My laugh, distorted, hollow, dripping with mockery. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with every step I took. Then I saw it, just for a moment. A flash of movement at the edge of my light. A tall, gaunt figure with limbs too long and a head that tilted unnaturally as if it were studying me. Its eyes gleamed faintly, like dim coals buried in ash. And then it was gone, retreating deeper into the labyrinth. The sound wave device beeped, signaling it was ready. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the activation switch. This was the plan, right? Lure it into the trap, hit it with a concentrated blast, and end this nightmare. But standing there, alone in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the hunter anymore. It had been leading me this whole time. Why? It spoke again, the voice shifting now, becoming a chorus of those it had taken. My team, my friends, their voices twisted into a single, monstrous question. Why did you let this happen? I clenched my jaw, pushing forward, one step at a time. You're not real, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My flashlight flickered, and the tunnel opened into a cavernous space, the ceiling lost to shadow. The air reeked of decay and damp earth. This was it. The final stand. The whaler emerged from the far end, its form almost human but wrong in every possible way. Its skin was ashen, stretched tight over its skeletal frame. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. And then it screamed. The sound wasn't just a noise, it was a weapon. It tore through the air, through my mind, ripping at memories, dragging up every failure, every regret. My knees buckled, and I hit the ground hard, clutching my ears as if that would help. But through the pain, I forced my hand to move, fumbling for the device. I had to end this now. The scream stopped abruptly, replaced by silence so profound it was deafening. I looked up, and the whaler was standing over me, its head cocked like a predator toying with its prey. For a moment, it didn't attack. It just watched, its coal like eyes flickering with something almost human. That hesitation gave me the opening I needed. My thumb slammed down on the switch, and the sound wave device roared to life. A blast of concentrated frequency erupted from it, slamming into the whaler and sending it staggering back. It shrieked, a sound of pure agony, as if centuries of pain had been dragged to the surface. It clawed at the air, at the walls, at itself, trying to escape the invisible force pinning it down. But even as it writhed, I saw it. The flicker of something else, a flash of recognition in its eyes, not anger, not hatred, just sorrow. I hesitated. I could have finished it right there, delivered the killing blow, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the look in its eyes. Maybe it was the faint echo of my name in its distorted cries. Or maybe it was the nagging thought that we had created this monster. Whatever it was, I couldn't do it. Instead, I activated the secondary function on the device, triggering the containment protocol. Reinforced barriers began sealing off the cavern, locking the whaler inside. It screamed again, the sound chasing me as I ran for the exit, but I didn't look back. When I finally reached the surface, the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. The surviving members of my team were waiting, battered but alive. I didn't tell them what I'd done. They didn't need to know. Later, as I burned the last of the Project Whaler files, I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A cry carried on the wind. Not a scream this time, just a cry, and I knew deep down that it wasn't over. It never would be.